How are you there again? The principles of sovereignty and democracy are very interesting to me because these rights are protected only by the most powerful. The world over, we know of the United Nations, which has got its unlimited powers, and the global architecture for peace and uh, coherence, peaceful, existence among countries is controlled by who? It's controlled by the major powers. You remember that after the First World War, the League of Nations failed, well, the Second World War. After that, we had the United Nations. So the power of the United Nations is kept by the strength of the current superpower, which is the United States and its allies in Europe, Britain, and the like. So you will see that things like sovereignty or peace between nations, it's really something that is not strong unless if the superpower is strong, and it is something that is given and it is protected by the superpower. That is why back then, probably over 100 years ago, we used to have smaller countries. Some smaller countries had bigger protectorate countries. We used to have British protectorates, French protectorates. Why? Because it was the French and the British and the other European powers that were the powers that would, so where the smaller powers or the smaller countries derived their sovereignty. It really hasn't changed much. It's still the same. We can talk about international law. What keeps international law applicable except the superpower? So the moment the superpower loses its superpower ability, that's the moment international law ceases to 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 have effect. Because if the superpower cannot administer international law, so whoever is the new superpower can just break that law or make new laws. So the global architecture that we have right now is held by the current superpower. But there is competition. No, there's competing forces around the world that want to take over the superpower position. And we're seeing China and the Russian axis making a move. However, I do not believe that they will succeed. But nonetheless, they are taking a move of which, if they were to succeed, God forbid, it means that the global architecture that we have right now will be dismantled. And that which will be brought in will be whatever it is that is on their mind. Judging by how they are acting in their countries and in the other in the nations that they're already dominant in, you will see that they will really bring about a global terrain, which is a very scary world to imagine. Therefore, that is why I always say it is important to fight against those that want to challenge the current establishment. In fact, we must expand the current establishment. As we can see that our country, Zimbabwe, is now being run or being protected or is under the protectorate of the Chinese and the Russians. Hence, you see the poverty and corruption in Zimbabwe because Putin and all the political leaders that fall under the auspices of Putin are by and large corrupt leaders whose purpose is to serve as country head for the purpose of siphoning wealth of those countries and paying homage to Russia. And Russia gets a big chunk of it so that they can wage a war against the superpower United States and its North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies in Europe. So So as we can see, an important thing that I want to highlight on this video and then I close is that I have been looking at the behavior of those that are fighting the superpower and how the superpower is defending itself. You see, China is the global manufacturing hub for the world. Do you know who made that possible? It was the United States, American investments. Now, China, because it grew and its economy is the second largest in the world, it's beginning to challenge the United States, and the United States is fighting back. So, one of the ways that global capital wants to de risk China is to invest outside China. I mean, invest in production capacity outside China. We've seen that investments have gone into Vietnam and other South East South Asian or Asian countries. Let me just say other Asian countries or Southeast Asian countries. Also India. So you see this diversification of of industry outside China by Western companies, and the geographical location is still Asia. So there is still a further need for geographical diversification. You don't want to just focus on Asia. Mexico is another country that has benefited and is going to benefit in this de-Chinaization or whatever you want to call it. Europe right now is at war. It gets gases from its gas from Russia, and German industrialization is under strain because Nord Stream 2 was bombed, and they're not a stable they're not a stable continent for industrialization at the moment. The next thing that you have is Africa. Okay. Now, in sub-Saharan Africa, stable countries in the southern part of the region, like South Africa, would be key in that uh, diversification route. But you see that the ANC and the EFF are willing to sleep with the devil, Vladimir Putin, to cause industrial destruction in South Africa through corruption in ESCOM that filters into a deindustrialization process in South Africa. And that causes those diversification plans into Africa to be put under a spotlight or to be put at hold. And then you will see that the next candidate in the region is Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe has got a labor market that is ready, educated, and cheap, and just got space. The country has got physical space. Botswana is stable, but it doesn't have physical space. Most of the Botswana country, I think about 80% of it is marshes, and the Botswana population is just 2 million people. Same thing as Namibia, stable country, 2 million population. The rest of the country is a desert. Mozambique is a language barrier. Education levels are very low, high poverty there. Then you only have Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi that are most likely to benefit from this diversification by geography. But then when you look at Zimbabwe, look at the politics of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the best in the region to receive American investment in industrialization so that we can be a supplier for the globe. Now, Zimbabwe has got everything, educated people, and the Zimbabweans that are all over the world who have been acquiring skills, they're able to save in the Zimbabwean economy. So the story for Zimbabwe is much stronger than any country right now in the region. Yet the problem that we have, only one problem in Zimbabwe, ZANU PF. Okay. It Mnangagwa's policies and his character and his position cannot allow that to happen, because for that to happen we need a country that is democratic, that respects property rights, that has got a strong financial services industry, and that is investor driven. And all of those things cannot happen under this ZANU PF regime because, as I've said before, that this regime, this Itim Nangok regime, exists squarely for the purposes of siphoning wealth from everyone. Okay, wealth that belongs to government, wealth that belongs to the public. So the drivers for this economic growth cannot happen under the leadership of Edim Nangagwa and his gold mafia. So the gold mafia must repent, dump Edim Nangagwa, get a new government in place that will actually drive this thing that I'm talking about. As I spoke before in my other video, whereby I said that in my government I want to create an economy that's going to work for Zimbabwean industrialists, and before we talk about global capital. But I'm telling you right now, once we can get our Zimbabwean industries and our Zimbabwean industrialists at play and fixing the rule of law and the other dynamics in the nation, that global diversification I was talking about will find its way into Zimbabwe and to spread across to Zambia, to Malawi, even to northern Mozambique and and Botswana, because Zimbabwe is healed and Zimbabwe becomes the financial hub of the region, the center for global companies. It becomes a launch pad for global manufacturing firms to start in Zimbabwe and then sprawl to these neighboring countries. If we get our country right, if we've got a government that is governed properly. That's the reason why we must remove ED Mnangagwa from power. Not just ED, ED and his fake opposition, Triple C and MDC, all of them. And the gold mafia must repent and dump ED Mnangagwa and follow my advice and my leadership to lead a proper governance system. Okay. Have a great night.